Welcome to the hottest real estate topics on the planet, keeping you up to date with all the creative ways to buy and sell real estate without bank qualifying, so anyone can build real income starting today. Here is another great show with Dealmaker Bill and Pete the Rookie.
All right, here we are at another episode of Flipping Houses for Rookies. Good morning, Peter.
Morning, Bill. Morning, everybody.
Here we go. Episode number 384. And today's title is, you ready?
Yes.
Drum roll, please. Something we have not done in 383 episodes.
Really?
Smart contract terminology for creative real estate transactions.
Oh.
Today's title is Smart Contract Terminology for Creative Real Estate Transactions. Here is the description. Secrets unlocked. This is not just another podcast episode to entertain you, but instead it's going to be your new gateway into a very prosperous future of buying and selling creative real estate deals. What most don't know is how much more money and wealth you can make with smart real estate contracts that have amazing sentences in them and acts like an ATM machine for the real estate entrepreneur. Truth is, creative real estate is not about the property, but about the documents that control the property. Do as we suggest in today's episode, and you will soon find yourself doing less deals and exceeding your financial goals because you have smart contracts doing the heavy lifting work for you. And I'm not talking about a bunch of lawyer talk either. Just everyday common speak that is correctly stated and correctly placed in a contract that makes you a fortune if you do it. So, if you are ready to hear something you have never heard in real estate before, tune in now because we're going to give it to you. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I know what you're talking about because I've seen you do it. No, really. You know, you say those words like, oh, this extra money you make. Yeah, sure. No, I've seen you do it. You just do some things in the contract that down the road, like, Bill, you got an extra like $8,000. Like, yeah. I mean, extra on top of, here's the deal, here's the money. Like, wait a minute, there's $8,000 more there. And wait a minute, when I went to the accountant, I saved $12,000 and stuff like that. That's not exact numbers, but seriously, go ahead. I like where you're headed. I like this part of it.
So let's do the housekeeping first. First of all, thank you for your dedication for listening to us and absorbing our information. I would like it if you would implement what we talk about. We're not here to give a lot of information away. We're here to help you implement or hopefully convince you, if you're not doing creative real estate, that creative real estate is very, very possible. And it is not as difficult as all the guys that sell the big courses and sell the seminars want you to think. So, with that said, if you want to ask us a question during the podcast or be part of the podcast, we stream it every Thursday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Facebook, and you can find us on LinkedIn. And you can ask questions on any one of those platforms, and it will come back right to us while we're doing the podcast. If you have a question about the podcast, if you have a question about something else, you can do one of two things. You can go to WhatsApp Messenger and find us on Let's Talk Real Estate, which is a group, about 100 and something people, I think, of like-minded people. You know, Napoleon Hill says you should be in a mastermind group. That's a free mastermind group for you to be in. Or you can go to flippinghousesforrookies.com. Top right-hand side, there's a support link in there, and you can send us a support ticket to either Peter or myself to answer your questions, because I check those several times a week. Okay, so, oh yeah, by the way, there is an amazing link inside the description of this podcast, so you should go check it out. I'll tell you at the end of the podcast exactly what it is, but you should go check it out. So what a topic today, Peter, huh?
Yeah. No, it's well, the way you describe creative real estate and the way we talk about it is, it's not just how much is the house, how much does it cost, how much will I make, number minus number equals number, that's like second grade math. It's way past that. There's so many profit centers.
It's interesting because so many rookies get stuck on the front end deal structuring on how to impress the seller that they completely miss the real money, because the real money's in the back end, right? And we're going to talk about some of that today.
Yep.
So I want to let you know that I'm complaining right now, which I don't do too often. How often do you hear me complain?
Well, not really. You don't complain. You see situations or problems, you figure, what are we going to do about it? But it's not just whining about it.
So this was a difficult one for me, this podcast, to write.
Really?
I wanted to cover the topic that's a little bit advanced, which is documents, and that's not usually a popular podcast for most. But the last month, or maybe the last five or six podcasts, I've been heavy duty because I've been making them for my coaching group and Creative REI Replay. We're putting some of the podcast in Creative REI Replay in the Facebook page and actually on our website to train some of my students. Okay? Mm-hmm. The reason why is because I have, and I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I have had conversations with Peter about episode 400, maybe turning the podcast off. Mm-hmm. So I'm like taking advantage of, and maybe that doesn't happen, I'm not sure, because of some things that are going on in my life. But if it does, there's some things I want to get out. I want to use the podcast platform to get them out. So there has been, if you noticed, a turn in the last half dozen, probably from 375, podcast 375 on, I've taken on some difficult topics, and we really dived in. And it's more about training than entertaining, right?
Yeah.
So in this particular case, it's a bit advanced, yet I wanted to make sure that I didn't overwhelm any of our rookies. So somehow I found a nice sweet spot to make sure I get across the information and yet let the rookies know that this is what's going on once you get into the deal structuring. I mean, once you get past the rookie stage and you make a few deals and you make a few bucks and you get high on your little dopamine of doing a deal, right? Then this is all the stuff in the background that most people don't talk about because there too many people are trying to teach you how to do your first deal and get your first check, right?
Yep.
And I think I nailed it today. Not to mention cover things you would probably learn in a $5,000 or $10,000 seminar, because this is where I've learned some of these, right? And I elaborated on them. So I got the idea, the concept in a $5,000 or $10,000 seminar, and some more. I paid more than that for seminars, but that's how I got started with this lucrative part of the business, right? I got these concepts, and then I went and kind of figured them. I elaborated on them, which is kind of my nature, right?
Sure.
So, before I get into the sentences and stuff, let's cover what a smart contract actually is.
I've never heard you use those words together, a smart contract.
Yeah, it's a specific thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a noun.
Well,
because
noun, yeah.
An idiom, yeah, it's a thing.
Well,
it's a noun is a person, place, or thing. This is a thing.
Right, and smart would be describing it, but together it makes like an actual noun, specific type of. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. I never. Go ahead, tell me.
So, at least this is what it means around here at Bill's Planet. This is what This is Bill's Planet is what's inside of the old noggins, what's behind my ear or between my ears, and that's a dangerous place for most, including me. Sometimes I get in deep trouble. So here we go. Here is my definition. You ready?
Yep.
It's a lot to take in one sentence.
Okay, go slow for us.
Smart contracts are self-executing and can automatically execute when a precondition is met.
Mm-hmm.
So a smart contract is self-executing and can automatically execute when a precondition is met.
Okay.
So I'm going to explain this. I'm going to go over the entire podcast is about this. So
Okay.
you don't have to worry about absorbing it all. Just realize we'll come back to this. But now to fully understand the power of this, let me explain how this is a bit different than traditional contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Traditional contracts require manual enforcement and execution, which is expensive and very often time-consuming.
So when something happens, you have to go do something.
Or an attorney.
Yeah, attorney. That's what I mean.
Or a
You
court.
get an attorney. You have to do things and handle problems to make things like kind of fight for something.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, let me give you an example. I put this in an email I wrote yesterday because I write an email every day. If you're on my list, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
So every day I put out tips every day on an email that I've got raving responses from. I got amazing open rates on my emails because they're engaging. Right? And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that this is the reason why, because I talk about things like this, right? So think of it like this, Peter. When you do your laundry,
Mm-hmm.
it's a manual action. You have to get the clothes, put them in the washing machine.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to take them out of the washing machine and put them in the dryer.
Yeah.
So there's 3 manual actions. Get the laundry,
Mm-hmm.
take the and put them in the washing machine. Take them out of the washing machine, put them in the dryer.
Mm-hmm.
And then take them out of the dryer, obviously, and bring them back to wherever they belong.
Right.
So the cycle of clean clothes is done with the machines,
Mm-hmm.
technically, but it allows, well, it requires, not allows, it requires manual, physical labor. But it's a lot better than going down to the river, with a rock and having to wash your clothes.
Slapping the clothes against the rock. Wham. That's right.
So there's automation in there, aka the machines,
Mm-hmm.
but the machines only cover some of
Yeah.
the work, not all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Now that
Now,
makes sense.
How could you automate washing your clothes? There's an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I used to do this all the time. And I found this out because my dad owned a laundromat. And I didn't know this until he owned a laundromat.
Oh, you don't, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. It was not a very successful endeavor. It only lasted about a year and a half. There's a thing called wash, dry, and fold in any laundromat.
Right.
You bring your clothes in, you drop them off, they do the cycle for you, and then you pick them up. Another way to do it is when you dry clean your clothes. I mean, in my town, we have a company that will come to your front door.
Yep.
They'll pick up your laundry, and they'll take it and clean it and bring it back. When I owned my auto repair facility, my gas station, we had a service where the guys would come in, and there was a basket or a place to put it, and they would put their dirty uniforms there. So they would bring their uniforms to work, and they would put them in the container, and once a week, the laundry people would come pick them up and then drop them off new uniforms.
Sure.
Right? So that's a way of automating it. So that's a good analogy of the difference between what I'm talking about here. It's kind of a funny analogy, but basically a smart contract executes stuff written in them automatically as long as the condition that it requires is met.
Right. So something happens, it prompts something else, and it just happens automatically.
Right.
It's like, well, it's almost like automatic bill pay. The 5th of the month comes, and your money automatically goes to pay a bill. It's all set up. You don't have to see anything. But my example is, it makes me wonder when I'm in my home that the heat goes on and off by itself and keeps me warm. I mean, you used to have to go to the fireplace, get the wood, turn it on. In the morning, you'd be cold, put it in. And now it's completely automated. It's just we take it for granted. It keeps the house at an even temperature all day, or changes for you. That's all completely automated. No fireplace, no nothing.
We have something very important to talk about.
Yes, what happened?
710 is oil upside down. That says cheers. That's a pretty good name for
710. Yeah, write the number
710
and then turn it upside down. It spells oil. Okay,
and it
funny.
spells oil. Yeah, that's pretty good. So cheers, brother. I'm assuming that's pretty cool, your name. So anyways, that's somebody in the chat. That's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, so for me, this is extremely beneficial because, as you know, I like to set and forget my transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I do that is I joke because I'm lazy, but you know me, I am far from that. Right?
No sense working when you can do it in a smarter way.
Right. My transactions, the reason why I set them and forget them is because I want to work on the transactions or put my attention on the transactions that haven't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So This is like driving down the road and looking out the windshield, not looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Right? If I have to constantly put my attention on the deals that I've done, AKA every month I gotta go fix a toilet, or I gotta go pay a bill, or I gotta go over here, or that, and I'm spending a majority of my time dealing with my properties, AKA renovations.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not putting my attention in the future making more deals. And you've been around me long enough, Peter, because this actually happened with me. I think it was 2017 when my wife got sick.
Yeah.
I decided that I needed to. It was a big wake-up call for me because I didn't want to. I realized I had what Kiyosaki called, I had a glorified job. I didn't have a business that was automated. Right?
Yeah.
You and I were doing renovations, and we were making money, but we were doing renovations and doing all this stuff, and it was stopping us from making more deals.
Yep.
So what I realized is that money was nothing compared to what I could make on pretty houses.
Yeah.
And I just got really clever, and I'm not bragging, but it was survival for me because my wife was pretty ill. Mm-hmm. She was pretty ill, and I was wondering if she was going to make it.
Yeah. And
it was a trying time for me, but I came out of it, and she's healthy as a dog, and so this set it and forget it was very beneficial to me because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to keep track of the contracts. You get a bunch of properties, you don't want to go you don't want to forget things. How do you keep track of everything?
Yeah.
Right? Now, today I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of how this works in contracts that I've built.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been known to pay $3,500 for a contract and then give it to my lawyer and spend several $1,000s altering it. So I feel like I've gotten some pretty good contracts. You and I were in a seminar one time. I forgot what the seminar was about. I think it was about special needs houses, right?
Yeah, the crazy Italian Nick. That was very, very good, and we got his materials on how to manage and own property. Yeah. And
by accident, we stayed after his class, and he pitched a program for it was $1,500 or $2,000. Mm-hmm. Had nothing to do with the program. He was selling his documents, and I'm like, Peter, that's shit. That's cheap. We got to get those documents. Yeah. And there's 2 or 3 documents in there that we use. Mm-hmm. I bought the entire package just to get a couple of his documents because they were pretty nice.
Yeah, it's documents, letters. These are all kinds of things to manage properties. What do you do if? How do you avoid that problem? Because he'd been through it and he worked on it hard.
So realize these work very well and extremely legal because of all the parties, because all parties have completely understood and trust the contract's execution. So
well, they signed it.
Right.
I mean, sorry, you go to watch any TV show. Sorry, you signed it. You got to do it now. So
the point that I want to make is that I say, and I have said in the past many times, if it's not in writing, it's not true.
yeah,
The reason why we say that is because the contract is the reference point in any dispute. So if it's not written, it's not true.
yeah,
So I'll have somebody come at me and say, well, you said blah, blah, blah when you rented me the place or when you sold me the place. And I'll just very cordially just say to them, if I said that, I would have written it down. So just go get your documents and show to me where you see that. And then we'll chat. And then it'll just go away.
yeah.
Or if it's there and I did write it down, they'll bring it back and they'll show it to me. And there's no dramatization, there's no drama, there's
no argument.
Arguing, there's no blow up, there's nothing. Right? So I started to do this about 5 years ago in my career, which I was telling you about with my wife. Starting getting buyers. I'm sorry. That was incorrect what I just said. I don't know why I said that. I started doing this about 5 years into my career.
Oh.
With the documents. And the reason why is I started getting buyers cashing me out, and I needed to contact my sellers to assist me in my closings. And it was very grueling task at first, chasing these people down years later. Now, that's a valuable lesson just to rookies, because just what I started this podcast with, what happens is you don't think of these things when you're making the transactions. You're so hungry for the money, and you're so blinded by what you think is needed and wanted that you don't absorb what's happening.
Yeah. Well,
right?
It's not very likely you're going to predict what's going to happen in 2 years, maybe.
Right.
Hindsight's 20/20, but there's a lot to do in present time. Forget 2 years. What if? And of course, you go through it and go, gee, I could have thought of that, but there you are. What do we do now?
Yeah, this is like standing on the edge of a pond and throwing a rock in the pond, and all you're thinking about is the rock.
Mm-hmm.
And then never going around the other side of the pond to see the ripple effect that rock throwing in there caused.
Mm-hmm.
You never went to the other side to see what happened.
Yeah.
And then one day you find yourself on the other side like, oh my God, I didn't know I did that.
Mm.
So when I say I have 30 years experience and I've done hundreds of deals, that's not to brag to you. I'm telling you these things were done. One of the things that amazes me, I usually say irritates me, but it doesn't irritate me because I'm past that now. But what amazes me is when people take my scripts and they change them.
Oh, yeah.
They don't realize that I've talked to thousands of sellers. I've had thousands of conversations. But you know what I never talk about, Peter?
What?
I've had thousands of responses from that question.
Well, a lot of times you say the response is more important than the question. When you first said that, I didn't quite get that. But it's true. But what's the difference what you say? It's what you're trying to learn from them in their own words, what they need, what they want, what they're trying to do. And then you do something along what they're talking about. What are they saying? That's what's important.
Well, their situation. They will tell you your situation if you ask the right question.
Yeah, they'll tell you what they will do or won't do.
And the interesting thing is that with human beings, you're like, say you're here, like you say you have a scale. At the bottom of the scale, it's A, and then it goes up B, C, D. Let's say that's levels of like intelligence or levels of experience. How's that?
Experience, sure.
Right? So you're at A, But when you're at A, you can't see what's at B because A is keeping you blinded. It's kind of like you have confusions and you have stuck attention and there's no way you can look at B.
No, you got enough to do with just getting through A.
And it's all confused and blocked, and you don't have the reality of B.
Nope.
Right? Because you're confused, and your mind is not able to solve that problem.
Yep.
So there's no way you can think about B.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what happens with rookies: is that they're at A, they're at that low level A, and they're thinking about how they can make a transaction. All they're thinking about is the money.
Mm-hmm.
And not thinking about all the other things.
So you were telling us about when you lost the sellers. You gonna finish that one? Like what you did with that?
What do you mean?
Well, you're talking about you started paying attention to contracts when you went to sell the house, and the buyer wanted to cash out.
That's why I started creating these smart contracts, is because I needed things to happen so that once I did the deal, I never had to talk to the seller again.
So the seller wasn't around. You couldn't find him, but you had something worked out that in paperwork where you had his permission to sell or he had something signed by him, so you didn't have to go find him. Something like that.
Okay, so let's go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go backwards. So what I talked about was, let me see here.
I want to see how that story ended. It was good.
Well, it wasn't good because I finally contacted them. So let me see. So traditional contracts require manual enforcement and execution.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started, I was using like legal contracts from the lawyer.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, what did I need to do? I needed to manually enforce and execute the contract.
Yeah.
So what I needed to do is I needed to make contracts that I didn't need to manually enforce and execute the contract. That's the smart contract.
So it was worded so that when something happened,
yes.
It was all set.
So what I had to do is I had to go find my sellers and I had to get them to sign stuff and do stuff so I could do a closing.
Right.
So what I needed to do was make it so I didn't have to do that anymore.
Right. So you found a way around that.
So it was a grueling task at first chasing these people down years later, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now realize this, and it's very, 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 very important to know. Smart contracts often remove the need for intermediaries. So I'm going to explain that. So an intermediary is someone who passes messages or language or proposals between two people or two parties.
Mm-hmm.
So an intermediary is what's in the middle of two people passing all the information back and forth.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like it's the middleman, and that can only slow things down because he has to. You tell him, and I'll tell you.
Let me finish the sentence. So smart contracts often remove the need for intermediaries to handle transactions by their part, adding time, delays, and fees.
Sure.
So that's what I was doing in the beginning, is I had intermediaries, attorneys, and I would have to pay them, and I'd have to hunt people down, and we're trying to do a closing because we were in Connecticut, and that was we use lawyers to do our closing,
mm-hmm.
right? Because of the way the escrow money's handled, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I did it in the beginning. What's more interesting about this to me is how I have spent my 30 plus years building and adding to my contracts so they actually make you a shit ton of money once any precondition is met. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was talking about earlier, I went off on a little bit of a tangent on the scripts, because it's like these sentences were tested with thousands of sellers, right, on hundreds of deals.
Yep.
And it was the responses. So when I get somebody that changes a sentence, it's like, it's kind of like this. It's kind of like I hire an acquisition manager and he's on his job his first week.
Yeah.
And he decides this is a better way to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then what happens is just to be right, he gets everybody else to do it, and all the other acquisition managers to do it. Say there's 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing you know, what happens to the income of the company?
Stats go down.
Right? This is what it's like. This is what it's like with my rookies, is they think that they're smart enough, and maybe they are, but I'm telling you, I lost track at 4,000 or 5,000 houses that I was in, nose to nose, toe to toe, belly button to belly button.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In the houses to form these sentences in these words. Now, the contracts are the same way. I've done hundreds of deals myself and with coaching clients and saw how these contracts turn out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not, and I'm not bragging about any of this, I'm just trying to emphasize the validity of the testing and the provedness, you know, the way these contracts, the way this works, and how, and anyways, I'm going to keep going, right? Because I'll just ramble, and I don't want to do that.
No, I get it.
So I've cleverly set these preconditions. Now listen to this. I've cleverly set these preconditions on common failures I've had in my years.
Yep.
So the preconditions are what has happened to me the most. So those are the things that I want to get off my plate, and I want those triggers to automatically handle it so it's not back on my plate, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, I always say, right? I make more money when the client doesn't do what they're supposed to than what they do. And this is the reason why.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things are like that, right? Don't pay your bills, don't pay your credit card, fees, interest, interest, right? The banks make how many billions on fees? $3 here, $2. Not even the interest, just fees. Yeah.
Well, that's how banks survive. That's how they make all their money.
Yeah.
So my point is this, right? So I stand up in front of seminars, which I don't do anymore now. I do all Zoom calls, but which I want to get back to seminars one of these days, but we'll talk about that later.
Wow.
When I stand up in front of a crowd and I say I make more money from the day. Well, let me keep reading because I talk about this, right?
Yeah.
So let me give you an example of how you make more money by the default than if they stay in the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, suppose they don't cash me out at the end of the 2-year agreement.
Right. So you're on a lease option. He's supposed to execute, get a mortgage, pay for the house, and he doesn't do it.
Right.
Okay.
So you keep making money. Because like one of my deals that I talk about all the time, he's been in the house. I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. He had a 2-year contract, he's been in the house 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I make $1,000 a month. I went from making $24,000 to $60,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's just continuing the arrangement instead of it ending.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want it to end, you write, I want it to end, but let it keep going and you keep making money.
Right. And I'm going to show you, before I get done, I'm going to show you why that is so profitable.
Okay.
Right. A lot of people think when they pay late or they don't pay, that's what keeps people awake at night.
Yeah.
You know, rookies awake at night.
Yeah.
So I used to lay awake at night worrying about this. Like, what if they don't pay?
Yeah.
Until one night I realized I need to make more money on the defaults than the non-defaults. Right?
Yep.
And it was 3:00 in the morning, and here's what happened after multiple nights, multiple weeks, worrying about this, right? And here I was at 3 a.m. in the morning I woke up thinking, what if they don't pay? And here's what happened. I fell back asleep and never worried about it again because I realized this is how banks do it, and I needed to do the same thing. And I mastered it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does that make sense?
Well, if you have a disadvantage, you have to find a way to make it an advantage.
So, just as a side note, I don't want to talk about this because this could be a whole podcast by itself. But when I'm structuring a deal and I'm doing my numbers, like suppose I'm taking over a subject to deal.
Yeah.
And the payment's $1,400 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I do my math and I figure out how much money I need for the deal, like suppose I need to do a little bit of repairs and I need to have my closing costs and I got to blah, blah, blah. I always make sure that I put an extra payment in there. So if the payment is due on the 1st of the month, right? And I'm doing the deal, we'll say on the 20th of the month, of the previous month. I'm going to make sure I have money for the 1st of the month and the next month. And the reason why is because all my mortgage payments are 1 month ahead.
Well, after the fact, in a sense.
Right. I always pay a month in advance at my closing. So I have a cushion of a month. So if somebody doesn't pay me, I have a whole month to fix it.
So in your financing, how much everything costs, you add 1 month of rent
Right.
to your expenses, and you just have that sitting there. That's smart.
So if I'm going to raise money or if I'm going to put money into a deal, that extra $1,000 or $1,200 or $1,500 is not going to change the deal. It's just going to set it up so that I'm always a month ahead. So I'm not sweating. I'm not laying awake at night wondering what happens if somebody doesn't pay.
Well, it's like the idea of somebody putting a deposit down a month ahead, but you can't use the deposit. That's their money for when they leave, unless they screw up. So it's nice that it's there, but you can't use it. So you put another month of your own right there for yourself.
As part of the deal.
Yep.
Right? So that's just a little tidbit that I always, if you're gonna do math, do all the math.
All the numbers.
Right. So let me show you. Let me show you a few ways that I've done this. Okay. So, but first realize that there's a difference in controlling a property with documents and owning a property with documents. This is important because this is the difference between creative real estate, right? So, and to make it really easy, the difference between controlling a property and owning a property is the deed.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Whose name is on the deed, right?
Yeah.
Is your name on the deed or your company name on the deed? Right? Which means you control the property with documents, with the deed, right? So let's back up. If your name's not on the deed, right? That means you control the property with things like options and leases or agreements for deeds. Even a purchase and sales contract for a short period of time. You can use a purchase and sales contract, right, or a purchase and sales agreement for up to about 60 days to control the property.
Right. The other person has signed it, so there's some legally binding steps that have to be done in times and when things should or shouldn't happen.
Right,
So,
and they can't sell it out from underneath you because you're under contract.
right.
So you can control a property with a purchase and sales contract. So if you don't put the deed in your name, and this is not what other people teach. I didn't learn any of this and all the hundreds of thousands of dollars I spent in my training. Nobody ever taught this to me. I just figured this out on my own because it's just common sense. So if you are a rookie, you should absolutely do your first deals without putting a deed in your name, which means you would do lease options or agreement for deeds. And if you want a wholesale, which I don't suggest, you can get a house under contract. Right? What most rookies don't realize is that they will stumble across a subject to deal, and they try to do that deal. What they should do is they should put it under a purchase and sales contract, and then wholesale the contract to somebody like me that knows how to do the deal. So you shouldn't refuse the deals, but if it's a deal above your head, remember I told you A, B, C, D, the training
experience.
A is a, right? So
Yeah.
if you're at A and you know this is a B or C deal, doesn't mean you have to do it and force yourself to learn and make a mistake. It just means you tell the seller, okay, I'm going to sign this contract, but I want you to know my partner does these kind of deals and I'm going to give it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to close with you. That's all you have to say. Or I have a friend that does this, or however you're going to say it. And you go sell that contract to somebody like me for $1,500, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, whatever, and just make money for your time.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people will bring contracts to me like that and say, if I give you this deal, I want the money, but will you show me how to close it? And I'll keep them in the deal to show them how to close it, right?
I was just going to say, I will sell you this for $2,000 outright, or for $1,000 if you just let me watch how you do it,
Right.
and I'll help you do it. I'll run errands for you, whatever, because that'd be worth it.
That's
You
just
know?
a side note, right? So,
Yeah.
so we need to keep moving here because we're behind. So, if your company name, if your name and your company name is on the deed and you own it, and that's it, you have the deed in your name, it's a lot harder for you to walk away from the deal.
Yeah.
Which is why I say when you're a rookie, you need to control property, not own property.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that with options and leases and agreement for deeds and the purchase and sales contracts.
Yeah.
Right? But when you own them, you get the deed in your name. And those are deals like subject to deals, owner finance deals, fix and flip deals, wholesale deals, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, when I'm talking about controlling, I'm talking about our sandwich lease option deal, which is a slot deal. That's like wholesaling lease options. You don't stay in the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could do sandwich lease options and stay in the deal because you got 15% worth of equity and 20% worth of cash flow. Or you can do agreement for deeds for those. And it sounds confusing, but in the beginning, you should just control the property. Okay?
Yep.
So let's take an option agreement first. Seeing how this is the root of our types of deals.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what we use most. Creative real estate would have trouble existing without an option. Now in Texas, they have trouble with lease options because they're only allowed to do them for 6 months. Mm-hmm. So what we do in Texas is we just use agreement for deeds and we do everything that we talk about, slot deals, rent to own, all that stuff is done with an agreement for deed. They call them land contracts in Texas. Mm-hmm. So everything works the same. It's just different documents. Okay.
Yep.
So here's a couple of examples of preconditions that pay you a lot of money. A lot of money.
The needle is pinning in the red there, baby.
So number one, and they're numbered arbitrarily, not by the first or second, just to keep track. So down payment money.
Okay.
Or on an option agreement, it's called option consideration deposit, which translates into a non-refundable deposit if you leave the deal. So an option is the right to buy, but not the obligation to buy. But you have to pay for that right.
Sure.
So much like the stock market, you can buy, you have a $400 stock and you don't have $400, so you can pay $10 or whatever the number is to control that stock. So if the stock goes from $400 today up to $450 tomorrow, you can sell the stock and make the profit. But if the stock goes down to $350 and you paid $400, you're not obligated, you just lose your $10.
Yep.
Houses are exactly the same way. This is how we have no risk real estate. No money down, no risk. Now the slot deal, what happens in the slot deal is you give your seller $100 for the option or the right to buy it, right? Not the obligation, just the right to buy it, right?
Yeah.
And you sell or assign that option to your buyer for $10,000. That's a slot deal. So you're paying $100 to control the property, and your seller doesn't know how to do this, and they need your consultation on how to do it, right? Which we teach, which is not hard. You're going to sell. So you're buying and selling an option agreement, not a piece of property.
Yeah.
So you paid $100 for the option agreement, and you sold it, we'll say, for $10,000 or $3,000 or $20,000. I've had people selling for $60,000, $70,000. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if this is the first time you're hearing about it, you're not going to believe it, but that's how the business works. It's an opportunity. Right. You have the opportunity to buy the house, you pass the opportunity to someone else.
All right. So I'm a little bit worried about time, so I'm going to just do this real quick because it's a confusion.
Yeah.
So when somebody buys a house, we'll say the house you sign an option agreement for $200,000 with your seller. You go find a buyer that's willing to pay $210,000.
Yeah.
They give you $10,000 down. That $10,000 is your money. It's down payment money. Now here's what happens. The seller knows that you made your money that way. The seller knows you got the closing costs for him from your buyer.
Yep.
Which is the $10,000. They owe the $200,000 to the seller. You write the contract that way. Now here's the interesting thing is the $10,000 the buyer gave to you was considered non-refundable option consideration deposit as long as they're under the option agreement. But in the option agreement, what happens is it says when you get a new mortgage or you want to execute this option, send us a notification within 30 days, and we will write a purchase and sales contract. When you write the purchase and sales contract, the $10,000 non-refundable deposit, it's the same money. You're just going to reword it on the purchase and sales contract as a deposit.
Right. And they get the credit for that as down payment on the house, and the bank sees that, and they're happy about that.
So 2 years later, they do not need to come up with more money. It's the same money. You just need to transfer the $10,000 credit onto the purchase and sales contract. You need to have evidence that they gave you the $10,000. So you produce the purchase and sales contract showing that they gave you $10,000 2 years earlier, and the bank is happy. Because all the bank's job is to make you whole. If you sold a $210,000 piece of property, the bank's job is to either have the bank give the money or the bank and the buyer give the money so they meet the $210,000. So if you already have $10,000 and you're happy with that, they just need to come up with $200,000 and that's all they want. Right? So it works perfectly. Number 2. And this is incredible. This is on the goosebump meter. This is a 10 out of a 10. Guaranteed to give goosebumps.
Okay.
I say that because my wife tells me all the time, "You're giving me goosebumps." Now take this down payment concept, right?
Yeah.
Where they're giving you $10,000, right? You can break that down into 2 parts.
Really?
Yeah. You could have money now and money monthly.
Yes.
So an example on this would be a $200,000 house. You're requiring 10% down. Now, I didn't do this for a long time. I've just recently been doing this, right? Instead of requiring, because I always required 5% down because that's what I need for an FHA mortgage is 5%. I know you can do it for 3%, but I guarantee for 5%.
Yeah.
So I make sure that I have at least 5% down, so when they go for an FHA mortgage, they already have their down payment. We just got to meet the other criteria.
Yep.
I changed my operating basis and started asking for 10% down. So on a $200,000 house, you need 20 grand down. Most people don't have that, but they will have $10,000, or can get $10,000.
Yeah.
Very often they'll have $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and they'll go borrow $2,000, $3,000 from grandma or whatever. Right? So they'll give you $10,000 to move in, which, by the way, is how much? That's the 5% for FHA.
Yeah. So they're covered there.
Right? So now what you do is you take the other $10,000 and you make monthly payments. We call this down payment assistance. So that $10,000, now lately we've been doing 36-month leases instead of 24-month leases just because of the way things are. And I'm doing that because I'm worried about turbulent times in front of us and banks not giving loans and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of forecasting the future to be a little bit rough. So instead of trying to get things done in 24 months, I'm giving myself an extra year in case that happens, right?
Right.
So 36-month lease. So if you take $10,000 and divide it by 36 months, that's an extra $277 a month.
Mm-hmm.
That's above and beyond the rent payment. So if they're paying $1,600, now they're paying $1,877. But the $277 goes towards their purchase price.
Right. The rent doesn't. That's just the lease. That's just the rental.
Right.
So, and it's a benefit for them too if they can do it, and they should. When it goes time to get the loan, they only need $180,000, not $190,000. So they're a little ahead of the game that way too.
So here's the goosebump. Here's the goosebump factor. Okay?
Yeah.
Now pay attention to this. If you do a slot deal, which we just talked about, a sandwich lease option transaction, what happens is you usually do those within 30 days because you find the seller and find the buyer, and you put the two of them together, and you make your money by the down payment money, or what we're talking about here. That's how you make your profit.
Right.
So your profit is the difference between what you have to pay your seller and what you collect from your buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So if your seller says they want $5,000 down and you get $10,000, then you make $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If that happens, which doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. Now watch this. You still do this. Now you sell the house for $220, because in today's economy we could do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The seller wants $200. The buyer commits to $220. They give you $10,000 down now, and they give you $277 each month for 3 years, but you don't even own the house. You're not even in the transaction.
That's crazy. I mean, yes, that's true. Usually you walk away and it's over. This time you walk away and you still get paid. But it counts towards their down payment, so you're not stealing money.
But you're going to write it in the contracts. You're going to write, because what I do when I do a slot deal is I write a mock purchase and sales contract that the seller can either use when they decide they want to execute the option, or they can at least give it to an attorney and have them duplicate it.
Okay.
So they know how to write it. So I write a mock means not a fake, but a not meant to use in real life, right?
Yeah.
So
it's premature.
So here's what happens. Yeah. So here's what happens, right? You're making $277. Now I get a question a lot of time on my support calls and my seminars and stuff, like what happens if they don't pay? My answer is, okay, so when did they stop paying? And the person asking the question is, well, what do you mean? I mean, like, when did they stop paying? Did they stop paying on the third payment, on the eighth payment, on the 30th payment? And they'll give me an answer, like the eighth payment. Well, you got 8 payments for free.
Yeah. 8 payments that you never got before.
Yeah, it's not collateralized, so you can't do it. You could go try to chase them in small claims court and all that kind of stuff. It's not worth it. Just see if you can get them to pay. If you can't, then just walk away. Mm-hmm. But you got 8 more payments in this particular case. It's $2,000.
It's like found money.
Right. All right. Number 3. So still working on an option agreement. Mm-hmm. What if you added a sentence in the option agreement like this? Ready?
Yeah.
I get any principal reduction from any mortgage that I make payments on. So if you're paying the seller, we'll say you start your deal on January, and you paid your seller 12 months till December, and now you're going to execute your option. Even though you're paying a lease, he's paying the mortgage from those lease payments, right? So you want principal, and I don't do it that way, because what I try to do is I try to pay the bank directly so they can't steal my money.
Ah, right.
So a lot of times on my leases I'll pay the bank directly, but it depends. Even if they get a profit, I'll cut 2 checks every month. I'll do one for the bank and one for them so I can control the property. But that's my own preference. Mm-hmm. My point that I'm making here is in that 12-month period, every time I paid the lease payment or I paid the mortgage payment, I get the principal reduction. Now, the last contract I did with a seller that I did this, I added this one line.
Yep.
I made $21,000.
Yeah. I remember you doing that. I remember the number.
Over
but
3 years.
It was 3 years, yeah. But it's
The
like,
one
well,
before
I'm paying
that,
the mortgage.
the one before that, I made $18,000. All for one sentence added on my option agreement, which, by the way, created a precondition and triggered my 21 grand and my 18 grand, which, by the way, is $39,000 on 2 contracts with 2 sentences. Most people make $39,000 in a whole year working.
Yeah.
I made it in 5 minutes by adding a sentence to my agreement. Is this a smart contract?
They should say at the top, smart contract.
All right, so let's keep moving. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, I have for an example here. How about this? What if you set up your lease with your buyer to say, if you get a loan within 12 months, I'll honor your price. But if you don't cash me out within 12 months, your price will increase by 0.25% per month until you buy it or cash us out,
Yep.
which is 3% a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, I did this example, but I'm lying to you just to keep my math, because I was, up until recently, doing 0.5% per month, not 0.25%.
Uh-huh.
But just in this example, I took that deal, right? And so the last one I did, I'm going to tell you what the numbers are at 0.25%, and then I'm going to tell you what they were at 0.5%, right?
Sure.
So the last deal I did like this, I had a 2-year lease. He didn't cash me out until 5 years later, or he's trying to cash me out right now, 5 years later.
Yep.
This one little thing, this one little sentence added to the option agreement, added another $21,600 to the deal.
At the price of the house.
Mm-hmm.
At least.
I actually did 0.5%, so it was actually like 45,000, 43,000.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said that the properties increase by about 3% a year, just on average. So if you don't build that into the contract, the longer you hold the property, the more you kind of get screwed at that lower price. People ask me that when we talk about, well, what if it's a few years and I'm losing money because the price of the house goes up and I got this stuff. So you can add that percentage so the price goes up. It encourages the person to cash out too.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So one little paragraph, no extra work for me. Just being clever enough to use a smart contract.
Yeah.
Now, just in these last couple of examples, I just talked about $60,000. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not $60,000 in new deals. It's $60,000 for using my smart contracts I've created over the years, the last 30 years, and making money. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So how many new deals do you have to make, or how much deal structuring do you have to make $60,000? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, you can put the effort into getting new properties and working, which you should do, of course, or optimize what you already have, like make more on what you're sitting on.
Right. Okay. I hope this is making sense to you, and some light bulbs are going off in your mind. Let's hit a few more. We're at 58 minutes, so let's hit a few more before we go. I'm going to go real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
How about my leases?
Mm-hmm.
First, I put the payment date as the 25th of the month. It works like this. I want $1,750 for my rent.
Mm-hmm.
But I make the payment $1,900.
Right.
I don't tell the seller this until I do the contracts. In other words, I sell them on $1,750.
Uh-huh.
They don't know that it's $1,900 until they get to the contract.
Okay.
And I do that intentionally because I tell them, if you pay on the 25th, I'll give you a $150 discount. It's $1,750.
Instead of on the 1st at 19.
Right.
Okay.
And I tell them I take my payments on the 25th. I tell them when I'm selling the house, and it's $1,750 if you pay on the 25th.
Okay. So the 17th and 25th is real. Otherwise, they're going to get really pissed at you.
Right.
Okay. That
So
makes more sense.
now here's an amazing thing. This is not a fee. Like a lot of states control late fees, and the court can slap your hands for too much money.
You're gouging or something.
It's just a precondition that about 30 or 40% pay every month in my portfolio.
And you call it a discount?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps you because you're
Not
getting
a
the
fee.
money. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, there's also a $50 fee in the contract saying if you're late, there's a $50 fee.
Yeah, well, that's usual. By the 10th, you owe more. They have to do that or else people won't bother. But you're getting the money early because that's good for you, isn't it?
So I get the money on the 25th because I know I have a mortgage payment. Now, I told you I pay a month in advance, but back in the day when I wasn't doing that, I would get the money on the 25th. So I had 10 days or 15 days or whatever to fix if somebody didn't pay. So it's double jeopardy because I'm going to get the money on the 25th and I'm a month in advance. So I'm not going to lay awake at night worrying about payments.
Yep.
Right? I got to tell you right now, this 30 or 40% that pay me these fees every month adds up to thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars a year.
Yep.
All right. Here's one more to prove my point, and then we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
When I do my subject to deals, my deed executes the trust. So my deed says a deed of trust. It's a warranty deed of trust. So it covers the warranty, it covers the ownership. Warranty means that there's no liabilities on the property. Right? So it's warranty, deed, which is transfer of ownership, and trust. Warranty deed of trust. It automatically creates a property trust, which is a whole nother conversation. We're going to talk about that in the next couple of podcasts.
Okay.
Right? So my deed executes the trust. I put the house in so it looks like we're doing estate planning, which is the real secret of not triggering a due on sale clause. It's over. You don't do that because you're putting it in a trust. The bank thinks you're just doing estate planning. But watch this. If you file a deed, you need to file a conveyance tax form. The city clerk, when you go to file the deed, will want this. They used to fill them out for you, but now you have to do it. So you go online and you get a conveyance tax form for your state or your city.
Right.
And this form asks how much you paid for the property. Or really it asks how much did the seller sell for.
Yeah.
If you went and got a loan, like most transactions are done, and paid all the money at the closing, you would pay that number to the conveyance. You would pay the conveyance tax.
Based on that pretty big number, about
So
1%.
if I bought a house for $180,000 and I went and got a loan and I replaced the money in the seller's deal, because realize every seller you talk to already has the money in the deal, and you just need to learn how to leverage that money without replacing it. But if you replaced that money and went and got your own loan, then the conveyance tax form would say you paid $180,000, and most places are 1%. So you'd have to pay $1,800 for conveyance tax. But
What do you do, Bill? What do you do?
If you're doing a subject to form, I want to finish because we're at 1 hour, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
If you didn't pay the $180,000 and you're just taking over the loan, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, subject to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to tell them you paid $180,000 because technically you didn't pay $180,000.
Mm-hmm.
You're just paying off the loan. So on my deed, I put how much did I pay for the house? I put $1 and other valuable consideration. Now, if you paid $100, then you could put $100, but don't put more than $100, right? Mm-hmm. But I put $1 in other valuable consideration. The conveyance tax says right on the conveyance tax form, if you paid less than $2,000, there's no conveyance tax. So because you put down $1 in other valuable consideration, that's less than 10. Because technically, that's all you came out of pocket with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you put that in the conveyance form. You just saved $1,800 for one sentence.
That's smart.
How much money do you think that idea has made me over the years? Now I'm talking about a $200,000 house. We know that the average house in the United States is $419,000.
Yep.
So that means you're saving $4,000 per transaction, per subject to deal. Sure. If you did 3 deals this year, you'd save $12,000 by that one sentence. How much over the decades? I've been doing this for 30 years. How much over the decades? I can't even add it up. More than you can imagine. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah. That's true. You never talked about this all at once like this. We've had conversation. I've seen you do the deals like, oh, that's a smart sentence.
Right. All right. So just so I don't get support tickets in the chat, I'm sorry. In the description of where you watched this podcast or heard this podcast, there's a link with my documents in it.
Wow.
These documents, it took me 30 years to get. The link
and
is
you're in the description.
Go check it out.
You better check it out. Bill doesn't give these away.
So make sure you like this. Well, first of all, make sure you subscribe to us wherever you're watching us or listening to us. Make sure you like us. Put a little heart there. If you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, make sure you put a comment in that you liked this podcast, and let others know that we're doing a good job. If we're doing a bad job, you can go ahead and tell people, but don't be rude about it. So, I don't. It doesn't bother me either way. You're telling me we did a bad job isn't going to change anything that happens unless we're making a mistake, which is after 380 something podcasts. I don't know that that's true, but it's possible. So make sure you like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and leave us a comment if you so wish. And don't forget to check out the link in the description. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for all your support. And thank you for trusting us and our information. Have a good week. Flourish and prosper. Talk to you on episode number 385. Over and out.
Thanks for tuning in to the hottest real estate topics on the planet with Bill and Pete. If you want to continue learning how to buy and sell real estate without money or credit, head over to flippinghouses.club for some cutting-edge real estate wealth tools. Or contact us at info@flippinghouses.club.